My name is Vorthak Ruumsale, and on the night this story begins, I had not slept in 9 days. Not because I could not, because I dared not. The moment I closed my compound eyes, the same face appeared behind them. A human face. Pale skin, brown eyes, a small scar above the left brow. The face of a man called Echo 7, the most wanted fugitive in the entire galactic concordance. I sat at my desk aboard the cruiser Viridian's Edge, staring at a wall covered in screens. Each screen showed a different planet. Each planet had hunters. My hunters. 847 agents spread across 200 star systems, every one of them looking for the same single human male. We had spent enough money on this manhunt to terraform a small moon. We had used technology so advanced that most species in the galaxy did not even understand how it worked. And after 3 full years of searching, we had nothing, less than nothing. We had ghosts, we had wrong leads, we had embarrassment piled on top of embarrassment. The door behind me hissed open. I did not need to turn around. The pheromones in the air told me exactly who had walked in. Director Quell, my superior, the being who held my career in her 3 slender claws. Vorthak, she said. Her voice was soft, which was the most dangerous voice she had. I have read your latest report. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. Kesari Prime, she continued. You raided a noodle restaurant. You arrested a Brunnix on holiday. He matched the visual profile, director. He had been to a salon. He had removed his fur for cosmetic reasons. He was not human, Vorthak. He had 3 hearts and breathed methane. The only thing he had in common with our target was that they were both, briefly, on the same planet. I lowered my head. The shame burned through my chitin like acid. She walked around my desk and stopped in front of me. Her compound eyes were close enough that I could see my own reflection in them. I looked terrible. I looked like a being who had failed. 30 cycles, she said. That is what you have left. 30 cycles to bring me Echo 7, alive and in custody. If you do not, I am reassigning you to customs duty on Frostmoon 6. Do you understand what that means? I understood. Frostmoon 6 was a frozen rock at the edge of charted space. Customs officers there inspected fish shipments. They counted barrels. They lived their lives in silence and ice. It was where the Bureau sent failures to be forgotten. I understand, Director. 30 cycles, Vorthak. She turned and left. The door hissed shut behind her, and I was alone again with my screens and my ghosts. I want to explain something to you, because if you do not understand this, none of what comes next will make sense. Echo 7 was not just a fugitive. He was a former intelligence officer of the Terran Federation. 11 years he had spent undercover in the outer regions of the galaxy. 11 years pretending to be different people in different places. And then, 3 years ago, he had walked into a concordance courthouse and handed over a data crystal that contained the names, account numbers, and private communications of 46 corrupt politicians, governors, and admirals. The crystal toppled 4 planetary governments in a single week. It started a war on the moon of Helek. It made him the most hated man among the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And then, before any of those powerful beings could thank him or silence him, he vanished. The official story was that he was a witness who needed protection. The real story, the one whispered in the highest offices of the Concordance, was different. He still had data. He still had names. The crystal he had handed over was only a small piece of what he carried in his head. And there were many beings in many high places who would pay any price, do anything, to make certain he was found before he could speak again. That was who I was hunting. That was why I had 847 agents and the resources of a small empire at my disposal. That was why my failure was unacceptable. And yet I had failed. Cycle after cycle, lead after lead, I had failed. I poured myself a cup of stim tea and tried to think clearly. Where had we gone wrong? We had the best biometric scanners ever built. We had gene sniffers in the air vents of every major spaceport. We had artificial minds trained on every photograph, every video, every audio recording of Echo 7 that had ever existed. We had agents in disguise on every world he might possibly visit. We had bounty offers so large that even his closest friends should have turned him in. Nothing, 3 years of nothing. I began to wonder, late at night when no one could hear me think, whether the problem was not him, whether the problem was us. Humans, strange creatures. They had joined the Concordance only 2 centuries ago, and in that time they had risen from a curiosity to a nuisance to, in some quiet circles, a quiet fear. They were not the strongest species, not the largest, not the longest-lived, but they had something none of the rest of us had, and I was only now beginning to understand what it was. They could lie, truly lie, not just with words the way most species lie, but with their entire bodies, with their faces, with the rhythm of their breath and the angle of their shoulders. The other species in the Concordance broadcast their emotions like radio signals. Their truth engines worked because most species had no defense against them. But humans could fool our best machines. Their nervous systems had evolved among predators that hunted by reading prey. Over millions of years, they had learned to control every signal their bodies sent. Heart rate, pupil size, the tiny movements of facial muscles. They could, with practice, become perfectly opaque, perfectly unreadable. And Echo 7 was not just any human. He was a human trained for 11 years in the art of being someone else, of being many someone else's, of becoming so completely whoever he needed to be that even he, perhaps, no longer remembered who he had originally been. How do you find a man like that? How do you catch a ghost who has spent his entire life learning to be invisible? I did not know, and that was why I could not sleep. A soft chime interrupted my thoughts. A message had arrived on my private channel. I almost ignored it. I had received thousands of false leads in 3 years, and each one had wasted hours of my time and burned a little more of my hope. But this one was different. The channel it had come through was unusual. It was not from any of my agents. It was not from any of my known informants. It was from a bounty broker named Delvin Oss, a creature with whom I had done business only twice before, both times for small matters. I opened the message. The text was short, 6 words. I have a way we'll sell. I stared at the screen. My antennae lifted slightly without my permission. There was something in the brevity that caught me. Most informants padded their messages with promises and praise. This one offered nothing but a sentence. It was either the work of a fool or the work of someone who knew exactly how desperate I had become. I typed back, "Explain." His reply came within minutes. My client wishes to remain unnamed. She offers identification of Echo 7 within 20 cycles. She refuses all concordance equipment. She will not use scanners, databases, or surveillance tools. Her method is her own. Price is fixed. Payment only on success. I read the message 3 times. Each time I became more certain that I was being approached by a confidence trickster. Identification without scanners, without databases. It was impossible. Our species had spent thousands of years building the tools that hunted fugitives, and now some unknown client wanted to throw all of them away and find Echo 7 by, what, sniffing the air, reading the stars. I should have rejected the offer. I should have reported it to Director Quell as a suspected fraud. I should have continued my own search and accepted whatever fate awaited me. But I had 19 cycles left, and nothing else was working. I typed back, "Who is your client?" A long pause, then his answer came, just 2 words. "She's human." I sat back in my chair. The pheromones around me must have changed dramatically, because the air filtration system in my office activated automatically, filtering out the chemicals of my surprise. A human. A human was offering to find another human. A human was offering to find the most carefully hidden human in the galaxy, using methods that could not be replicated by any technology in the Concordance. It was either the most foolish offer I had ever received or the most clever one. There was no middle ground. "Where do I meet her?" I typed. "Threshold Station, Promenade Level, Tea Garden Cafe. 3 cycles from now at the second meal hour. Come alone, she will recognize you." The connection closed. I stared at the empty screen for a long time. Threshold Station. I knew the place. It was a massive neutral territory hub at the edge of charted space, built where four trade routes intersected and no single government controlled the territory. Every species in the galaxy passed through Threshold at some point. Every secret was for sale there. Every crime was possible. Every person could be found if you knew how to look. It was, I realized slowly, the perfect place to begin a hunt for a ghost. I stood up. My 6 legs felt strange beneath me, as though they belonged to someone else. I walked to the window of my office and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among them, Echo 7 was eating a meal, or sleeping, or laughing at us. Somewhere among them, an unknown human woman believed she could find him in 20 cycles using nothing but, apparently, her own eyes. I should have laughed. Instead, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Something small and strange and almost embarrassing. Hoping. I went back to my desk and began to prepare. I told no one in the bureau where I was going. I filed a routine travel request that listed Threshold Station as a destination for general intelligence gathering, which was vague enough that no one would question it and specific enough that no one would worry. I had a significant amount of credits from my personal accounts, in case the broker's fee turned out to be larger than my expense budget could cover. I packed light. I told my second officer that I would be unreachable for a few cycles. And then just before I left, I did something I had never done in my career. I took the file on Echo 7, the full file, with every photograph and every report and every behavioral analysis our scientists had compiled, and I had onto a private data crystal. I placed the crystal in a hidden compartment in my travel case. If this human woman was real, if she could actually do what she claimed, she would need information. And I would need to be able to give it to her without going through official bureau channels, where any request might be intercepted by the powerful beings who very much did not want Echo 7 to be found alive. I left the Edge 2 cycles later on a small private courier ship. The journey to Threshold Station would take 1.5 cycles at maximum speed. I sat in the small passenger cabin and tried to imagine what kind of human would offer such a strange service. A retired soldier, perhaps. A former intelligence officer like Echo 7 himself. Maybe a hunter, the kind of human who tracked dangerous animals on the wild colony worlds. Whatever she was, I told myself, she had better be worth the trip. Because I had 19 cycles left, and after that my career, my reputation, and possibly my life would all belong to a frozen rock at the edge of charted space. The courier ship dropped out of light speed at Threshold Station's outer marker. Through the small viewport, I could see the station hanging against the stars, vast and lit and crowded with traffic. 1,000,000 beings lived or worked or passed through that place at any given moment. Somewhere inside it, in a small cafe on the promenade, a human woman was waiting for me. I had no idea what she looked like. I had no idea what she could do. I had no idea, as my ship moved into the docking lane, that I was about to meet the most dangerous hunter the Concordance had ever hired. And I had no idea, as the airlock cycled open and I stepped onto the station deck, that the entire understanding I had built of my own galaxy, of my own species, and of the strange creatures called humans, was about to be thrown away forever. The hunt for Echo 7 was about to enter its final stage. And it was going to begin, of all places, with a cup of tea. Threshold Station was loud. That was my first impression as I stepped off the courier ship and onto the main concourse. 1,000 species moved around me in every direction, speaking 100 different languages, and the air was thick with the mixed pheromones of every kind of creature that walked, flew, slithered, or crawled. To a being like me who could read chemical signals as easily as words, the place was almost overwhelming. It was a soup of emotion, excitement here, fear there, boredom, lust, hunger, greed. The full range of feeling broadcast at full strength with no filter and no restraint. I made my way through the crowds toward the promenade level. The station was built like a great wheel, with the residential and commercial sections arranged in concentric rings. The promenade was the second ring from the center, where most of the restaurants and shops were located. It took me almost an hour to navigate there, partly because the station was enormous and partly because I kept stopping to scan the crowds. Old habit. 3 years of hunting Echo 7 had taught me to look at every human I saw and ask myself the same question. Is that him? Is that the face? It was never him. It was never going to be him here on a station like this. He was too smart for that, too careful. He would not be standing in the open promenade, eating a sandwich. He would be hidden somewhere far away, in a place no one would think to look. That was what I told myself, at least. That was the comfort I gave myself as I walked. The Tea Garden Cafe was easy to find. It was tucked into a corner of the promenade, partially screened by hanging plants from a dozen different worlds. A small wooden sign above the door read its name in 3 languages, including the Old Earth language called English. Inside, the lights were warmer than the harsh whites of the rest of the station. The tables were small and round, and there were perhaps 20 of them, most occupied. The smell of brewing tea filled the air, mixed with the faint scent of baked goods. I paused in the doorway. My instructions had been simple. The client would recognize me. I should come alone. I should wait. I scanned the room slowly. A pair of traders sat at one table, deep in conversation. A young student bent over in the corner. 2 humans, a man and a woman, shared a pot of tea by the window, holding hands across the table. And then, at a small table near the back, sitting entirely alone, I saw her. I knew it was her the moment I looked. She was an older human female. By human standards, perhaps in her early 60s. Her hair was silver gray and pulled back from her face in a simple style. She wore a soft blue garment that the humans called a cardigan, with small buttons down the front. A pair of reading glasses hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She was reading a paper book, an actual paper book, the kind that almost no one used anymore, and she was sipping from a small cup of tea. As I watched, she turned a page slowly, took another sip, and made a small note in the margin of the book with a wooden pencil. She did not look up. She did not appear to notice me at all. But somehow I knew that she had noticed me the moment I had entered the cafe, and probably, I realized with a small chill, the moment I had stepped onto the promenade, possibly even the moment I had docked at the station. I crossed the room and stopped at her table. "Excuse me," I said, in the closest approximation of standard galactic that my translator could produce. "I believe you are expecting me." She finally looked up. Her eyes were a soft blue-gray color, the color of a cloudy sky, and they were entirely calm. She studied me for perhaps 2 seconds. Then she smiled, a small polite smile, and gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Please sit down, mister. You look exhausted. Have you eaten?" I lowered myself onto the chair. It was sized for humans and slightly uncomfortable, but I had managed worse. I placed my travel case carefully beside me on the floor. "I have not eaten, no." "That is your first mistake," she said pleasantly. She raised one hand and a server appeared at the table almost instantly. 2 pots of the jasmine, please, dear, and a plate of the rice cakes. The savory ones, I think. My friend is going to need his strength. The server nodded and disappeared. I looked at her carefully. My compound eyes could see in many ranges, including ranges that most humans could not even imagine. I scanned her quickly for signs of hidden weapons, hidden devices, hidden anything. There was nothing. She carried no technology I could detect, save for a simple translator chip in her ear and a small communication pad in her bag. She had no weapons, no body armor, no hidden compartments in her clothing. She was, by every measure my senses could provide, exactly what she appeared to be, an older human woman with a book and a cup of tea. And yet there was something about her that made my chitin tighten. "You have not told me your name," I said. "My name is Margaret Chen," she said. "Most people who know me call me Maggie. You may use whichever you prefer." Margaret Chen. I rolled the human syllables across my mouth parts. "And what, may I ask, is your profession?" She smiled again, the same small, polite smile. "I am retired now. I was for 40 years a food critic. I traveled. I ate. I wrote about what I had eaten. I am, by some accounts, rather well known in certain circles, although I imagine your circles are not those circles. I blinked several times. A food critic. That is correct. You are offering to find Echo 7, the most wanted fugitive in the galaxy, a man whom 847 concordance agents and 3 years of effort have failed to locate. You are offering to find him. Yes, dear. Because you are a food critic. In part, yes. I did not know what to say. My antennae lowered almost without my permission. I had come a long way to meet, apparently, an elderly human woman who reviewed restaurants for a living. I felt something rising in my throat that might, if I were a different species, have been a laugh, or a sob, or both at once. The server returned with the tea and the rice cakes. Maggie thanked her warmly. She poured a cup for me and pushed it across the table. I stared at it. Drink, she said, slowly. The jasmine takes a few sips before you understand it. I drank. The tea was hot and strangely pleasant. It tasted like flowers and somehow like patience. Mr. Vorthak, she said gently, I can see that you are skeptical. Of course you are. You have spent 3 years using the most advanced technology in your galaxy, and that technology has produced nothing. You are now sitting across from a 63-year-old human in a cardigan drinking tea. You are wondering very politely whether I have lost my mind, whether you have lost yours, whether the broker who sold you my services is laughing at you somewhere in a back room. These are reasonable thoughts. I would think them too if I were you. I said nothing. She had read my thoughts as easily as I might have read a child's school report. Allow me, she continued, to explain my method. Then you may decide for yourself whether to continue or to pay me for my time so far and walk away. I will not be offended either way. I am, as I said, retired. I am only doing this at all because the broker is an old friend and because I find the case interesting. Please, I said, explain. She set down her cup. She looked at me, and now there was something different in her eyes. Not hostility, not threat. Something deeper. The look of a being who has spent a very long life learning how to see and who has decided, just for a moment, to share what she has learned. Mr. Vorthak, she said, you are hunting Echo 7 with scanners, with databases, with facial recognition, with biometrics, with genetic sniffers, with every clever machine your engineers have ever built, and you cannot find him. Have you wondered why? He has been trained to evade those tools. His identity papers are flawless. His face has likely been altered. Yes, all of that is true, and all of it is irrelevant. He cannot be found by your tools because your tools are looking at the wrong things. And what, in your opinion, are the right things? She tapped a finger gently on the rim of her teacup. Tell me, Mr. Vorthak, what do you know about the way humans eat? I stared at her. About the way they eat. Yes. I know nothing about it. Why would I? Exactly, she said softly. Why would you? Why would any of you? It has never occurred to your bureau or to any of your scientists or to any of your 847 agents that the way a human eats a meal contains more information about them than their entire identity file. It contains where they were born. It contains who raised them. It contains what they do for work. It contains whether they have ever been hungry, truly hungry in their lives. It contains, sometimes, whether they have been trained to lie. I set my own cup down very carefully. Go on, I said. A human raised on the old continent of Asia, she said, holds chopsticks differently from a human raised in the colonies of the Mars territories. A human who grew up poor will, even if they later become wealthy, finish every grain of rice on their plate. A human who grew up wealthy will, even if they later become poor, leave a small amount uneaten as a sign of refinement. Both habits are unconscious. Both are nearly impossible to break, even for trained operatives, because both are taught before the age of 5 and they live below the level of conscious thought. She paused to sip her tea. A human trained in covert operations is taught, among many other things, never to leave any food on a plate that could later be tested for genetic material. So they eat the garnish, they eat the parsley, they eat the lemon wedge. Civilians do not. Operatives do. It is a tell. The training agencies put it there themselves and have never realized that they have done so. I felt my antennae rising slowly. A human trained in covert operations is also taught to eat with their non-dominant hand, she continued, so that their dominant hand stays free near where a weapon would be. They do this for so long that even years later, even when they think they have given up the trade, they still do it. Without thinking, without knowing, it becomes who they are. And Echo 7. An Echo 7, she said, is a human male who was born in a region of old Earth called the Pacific Northwest. He was raised by parents who were, according to his file, fairly traditional in their cooking habits. He was recruited to intelligence work at the age of 22. He spent 11 years undercover. He is left-handed by birth, but his training would have switched him to right-handed eating. He has been on the run for 3 years, eating what he can where he can, mostly low-quality food. He has not had a real meal, a meal that he could enjoy and remember in a very long time. She leaned forward slightly. Mr. Vorthak, she said, I can find him, not because I have any technology you do not have, not because I have any database you cannot access. I can find him because I have spent 40 years watching humans eat. I have eaten with hundreds of thousands of them. I have written about their meals. I have watched their hands. I have learned to read them the way you read pheromones. And the man you are hunting is, beneath all his disguises, still a human. Still a body that grew up in a particular kitchen, raised by particular hands, taught by particular schools and particular trainers. He cannot escape that body. None of us can. And the body, when it eats, tells the truth. I sat very still. Around us, the cafe continued its quiet business. Cups clinked. Pages turned. Servers moved between tables. A pot of tea cooled slowly between us. And inside my chest, 3 of my hearts beat faster than they had beaten in 3 years. How long, I asked, do you need? She smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes. 20 cycles, dear, possibly fewer. Now eat your rice cake. We have a great deal of work to do, and you cannot do it on an empty stomach. I picked up the small cake. I bit into it carefully. It was crisp on the outside and soft within, and it tasted of salt and sesame and something I could not name. It tasted like the beginning of the end of my hunt. It tasted like hope. I left the cafe 2 hours later with 1,000 questions in my head and a strange feeling in my chest that I could not name. Maggie had made me promise 3 things before she would agree to take the case. First, that I would do exactly what she told me to do, when she told me to do it, without questioning her judgment. Second, that I would tell no one in the Bureau what we were doing, not even my closest agents, because she did not trust the security of any concordance channel. And third, that I would eat at least 3 meals a day for the duration of our partnership, because, she said, a hungry hunter is a sloppy hunter, and she would not work with sloppy people. I agreed to all 3 conditions. I would have agreed to almost anything at that point. The next morning I returned to the cafe at the hour she had specified. She was already there, at the same table, with the same pot of tea and a different paper book. She looked up as I sat down and slid a small datapad across the table to me. This, she said quietly, is a list of the kinds of places where Echo 7 will eventually go to eat. Not where he might go, where he will go. The list is short. There are 47 establishments in the galaxy that meet the criteria. We are going to visit them, one at a time. In the order I have written them, we will eat at each of them, we will watch. I looked at the list. It was strange. Some of the names I recognized, most I did not. They were scattered across a dozen worlds in 3 sectors, a noodle shop on the moon of Helek, a fish restaurant on the colony of Nakai 2, a small place I could not pronounce on a station I had never heard of. Why these places? I asked. Because they are the places that a man like Echo 7, after 3 years of running, will eventually find. Mr. Vorthak, listen to me carefully. There is something you need to understand about my species. We are not, as your reports may suggest, primarily logical creatures. We are creatures of memory, of habit, of comfort. A human can survive for a very long time on bad food, but eventually, the memory of good food becomes louder than the fear of being caught. Eventually, the homesickness becomes more powerful than the discipline. Eventually, every human on the run does the same thing. They go looking for a meal that reminds them of who they used to be. And these 47 places are the 47 places in the galaxy where a man with his particular background, his particular childhood, his particular memories, would go to find such a meal. It is a short list because there are only so many places that serve genuine Pacific Northwest cuisine outside of Earth. Most of them are obscure. Most of them are not in databases. I know about them because I reviewed them over many years, and because I keep my own records. I stared at the list with new eyes. The places that had seemed random a moment ago now seemed almost obvious. A small Korean barbecue place run by a family from the old Seattle region. A salmon house on a colony moon that imported real Pacific salmon at great expense. A noodle shop whose owner, according to a small note Maggie had written beside the name, had grown up 2 streets away from where Echo 7's mother had grown up. He may not go to any of them, I said. He may not, but every cycle we spend without him eating something good, the pressure inside him grows. He has been on the run for 3 years. He has eaten ration paste. He has eaten station food. He has eaten whatever low-cost meals he could find without drawing attention. He is, I would estimate, very close to breaking, not in the sense of giving up, in the sense of needing just once to taste something real. We are going to be there when he does. I shook my head slowly. It seems, Maggie, like a hunt based on hope rather than evidence. She poured me a fresh cup of tea. All hunts, she said quietly, are based on hope. The only difference is whether the hunter knows it. We left Threshold Station that afternoon on a small private vessel that Maggie had arranged through her own contacts. I had wanted to use a Concordance ship, with its security and its support systems, but she had refused. No Bureau ships, she said. No Bureau agents. No Bureau anything. If we were going to do this her way, we were going to do it her way completely. The vessel was small and old, but it was clean and it was fast. And the pilot, a human male named Pete Holloway, was apparently an old friend of hers. He greeted her with a hug and gave me a polite nod and asked no questions about why we were traveling. The first stop on her list was the Korean barbecue place on a colony moon in the Velen sector. We arrived 3 cycles later, took a quiet table near the back, and ate. Maggie ate with great care, as though she were genuinely there for the food. She praised the chef. She made small notes in her book. She watched the other customers without ever appearing to watch them, and she taught me, between bites, what to look for. That man in the corner, she said quietly. Notice how he holds his chopsticks. He is gripping them too high on the stem. That tells me he learned to use them as an adult, probably for work or travel. He is not Echo 7. Echo 7 would grip them lower near the tips because he learned as a child. That woman by the window, see how she eats only the meat and leaves the vegetables. She did not grow up in a household that valued balance. She is wealthy now and was probably wealthy then. She is not connected to our man. That couple over there, the way they share food, putting pieces directly onto each other's plates with their own chopsticks, that is a habit from a particular subculture. They are not connected either. She read the room like a book. Each person was a sentence to her, each meal a paragraph. By the end of our 2 hours in that restaurant, I had learned more about humans than I had learned in 3 years of training reports. None of the humans in that restaurant was Echo 7, but Maggie had not expected him to be there. She had brought me there to teach me how to see. We moved on. The fish restaurant on Nakai 2, the noodle shop on the small station I could not pronounce, the salmon house, the dumpling place. We crossed the galaxy in pieces, eating our way through Maggie's list, and at every stop she taught me more. I learned that humans who had been hungry as children always finished their bread first, before any other part of the meal, because bread had once been the most reliable food in their lives. I learned that humans who had been raised in cold climates ate slower than humans raised in warm climates, because warmth at the table had once been a thing to enjoy rather than escape. I learned that humans trained as soldiers always sat with their backs to a wall and never to a door. I learned that humans who had lost someone they loved often left a single empty chair beside them. even in a crowded restaurant, without realizing they were doing it. I learned, in short, that humans were not what I had thought they were. They were not a single species, but 10,000 small species, each marked by their food, their region, their history, their wounds. And Maggie could read them all. 12 cycles passed. We had visited 18 of the 47 restaurants on her list. We had not found Echo 7. I was beginning to feel the weight of the deadline pressing down on me. 18 cycles left, 29 restaurants still to visit. The numbers were not going to work. On the 13th cycle, Maggie surprised me. "We are skipping ahead," she said over breakfast. "I was going to take you to all of them in order to teach you the patterns, but we do not have time for the full lesson, and more importantly, I have been thinking. Echo 7 is not just any operative. He is a particular kind of man with a particular kind of mind. I have been studying his file for 9 cycles now between our restaurants. I think I know where he will go. I think I know, in fact, exactly where he is." I sat up straighter, my antennae lifted. "Where?" "A mining moon called Brennan's Hollow. There is a small mid-tier human fusion restaurant there called the Stone Lantern. It is not on my official list because it is too new. It opened only 18 months ago. I reviewed it once briefly, and I gave it a positive notice. The chef is a young human woman from the Pacific Northwest. Her grandmother taught her to cook. Her food, I noted at the time, tasted like home in a way that very few restaurants in the galaxy do." "You think he is there?" "I think he is hungry and tired and beginning to break. I think he has heard, through whatever network of whispers reaches the people who run, that there is a place serving real food made by hands that learned in the same kind of kitchen where his mother learned. I think he will come. Not soon, perhaps, but soon enough." "How soon?" "Within 4 cycles, maybe 5, I cannot promise it, but the patterns suggest it strongly." I did the math in my head. 4 cycles to travel to Brennan's Hollow. 5 cycles waiting for him. If he did not come, I would have 9 cycles left to find him through some other method, which meant I would not find him at all. If he did come, I would have him. "All right," I said, "Brennan's Hollow." Maggie nodded. She put her napkin on the table, rose from her seat, and walked to the door. Pete was waiting outside with the engines warm. I followed her. I had been following her for 13 cycles, and I had stopped questioning where she led. Brennan's Hollow was a small mining moon in a system that few beings visited unless they had business there. The colony was old and weathered, built into the side of a great mountain of metal-rich stone, and most of its population worked in the deep mines that produced the rare ores the rest of the galaxy depended on. The air was thin and dry. The lighting was harsh. The buildings were practical and ugly. The Stone Lantern restaurant sat on the second level of the colony, in a small commercial corridor near the center of the dome. From the outside, it looked unremarkable. A wooden sign carved with a simple lantern shape, a glass door, a handwritten menu posted beside the entrance, with prices listed in 3 different currencies. Inside, however, the place was extraordinary. The lights were warm. The walls were paneled in real wood, an expensive choice on a mining moon. The tables were carved from a single piece of stone each, polished smooth by years of use. The smell of garlic and ginger and something I could not name filled the air, mixed with the rich scent of broth simmering somewhere in the back. Maggie smiled when we walked in. "Yes," she said softly, "this is the place. This is exactly the kind of place he will come to." We took a booth near the back. Maggie chose it carefully. From it, we could see the entire restaurant without being conspicuous. We were close enough to the door to observe everyone who entered, and far enough from the door to not be in their first line of sight when they did. I had been disguised before we entered, a holographic dampener wrapped around my body that made me appear, to all but the most careful observer, as an older human male in a worn coat. I had practiced moving like a human for several days before the trip. It was uncomfortable, but it would do. We ordered. The food, when it arrived, was extraordinary even to my non-human palate. Maggie ate slowly and watched the door. He did not come that night. We returned to our small rented room near the center of the colony and slept in shifts. Pete kept watch from the ship. He did not come the second night, or the third. On the fourth night, as I was beginning to lose hope, the door opened. A man walked in. Average height, plain coat, a short dark beard, a slight limp that favored his right leg. He was unremarkable in every visible way. His face was not the face of Echo 7. The bone structure was different. The eye color was different. The scar above the left brow was missing. Any scanner in the galaxy, including the ones I carried hidden in my disguise, would have read him as a different man entirely. The biometric reader in my sleeve confirmed it. According to every test I could run, this man was not Echo 7. He was a 48-year-old asteroid surveyor named Hollis Dre, with a complete and verifiable life history. I felt my hopes sink. He sat at a small table near the bar, 2 tables away from us. He ordered quietly. He kept his head down. The waitress brought him water and a menu. He chose his meal in less than a minute and handed the menu back. I leaned across the table to whisper to Maggie that we had wasted our time, that this was not him, that my scanners were certain. She raised one finger and gently shushed me. She was watching his hands. For 90 seconds she did not move. She did not eat. She did not breathe heavily. She simply watched. The man at the small table received his soup. He picked up his spoon. He began to eat. He did not look around. He did not seem to notice us or anyone. Maggie picked up a small dumpling from her own plate. She bit into it slowly, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed. Then she leaned across the table and spoke to me in a voice as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "That is him," she said. "Booth 6, the man with the soup." I felt every one of my heart stop for a fraction of a second. "You are certain?" "I am certain." "Maggie, the scanners say he is not. The biometrics say he is not. Every tool in this galaxy says he is not." "Every tool in this galaxy is wrong, dear. Watch." She tilted her head slightly toward the man. "He is holding his chopsticks wrong," she said. "Notice, he is gripping them too high, but watch his fingers. Watch the way they want to slide down. Every few seconds his thumb twitches as though it is trying to correct the grip. He is forcing himself to hold them wrong, which means he knows how to hold them right, which means he learned as a child, which is consistent with our man." "He has not eaten his garnish," I said. "I have been watching. He left it on the side of the bowl." "Look more carefully, dear." I looked. I had to use the magnification in my disguised eye to do it. There, on the man's napkin, almost hidden under the edge of his plate, was a small green leaf. He had picked the garnish off his soup and tucked it into his napkin, where no test could find it later. He had done it so smoothly, so casually, that I had not seen the movement when it happened. "He is doing the operative thing," I whispered. "He is doing the operative thing, and there is more. Watch when the waitress refills his water." I watched. The waitress approached his table from his left side, holding a pitcher. As she leaned over to fill his glass, the man, without looking up, without seeming to react, shifted his shoulders almost a half-inch to the right. His hand, the one holding the spoon, moved slightly closer to his body. A tiny movement. Almost nothing. But it was the movement of a man who was protecting his blind side from someone he could not see clearly. "He flinched," I breathed. "He flinched. He is not afraid of the waitress. He is trained, deeply trained, to react that way to any approach from his blind side. It is below his conscious thought. It is part of who he is. And one more thing, dear, the most important thing. He is left-handed. Watch the way his left hand rests on the table while his right hand uses the spoon. The left hand is loose, ready. The right hand is doing the work. He is left-handed by birth, but he is eating right-handed because his training taught him to keep his strong hand free. That is the final tell. That is what they all do, every one of them, and they cannot stop. It is who they are." I sat back. I felt strange. The room around me had not changed. The lights were still warm. The smell of garlic and ginger still filled the air. The man at the small table was still eating his soup. But everything had changed. I had been hunting this man for 3 years. I had spent enough money to terraform a moon. I had used the most advanced technology in the galaxy. And here he was, 8 feet away from me, identified by an older human woman in a cardigan in less than 2 minutes, by the way he held his chopsticks and ate his soup. "What do we do?" I whispered. Maggie took another bite of her dumpling. She chewed thoughtfully. She swallowed. "You arrest him, dear, before the dessert course. The creme brulee here is exquisite, and I would hate for him to ruin it for the rest of us by causing a scene during the main service." I almost laughed. 3 years of work and she was concerned about the dessert. I sent a quiet signal to my support team, who were waiting in 3 positions around the colony in case I needed them. Within 90 seconds, 4 of my best agents had quietly entered the restaurant in the disguises of late diners. They took their positions at 3 tables and the door without drawing any attention. The man at the small table did not look up. He continued to eat his soup. I waited until he had finished the soup. He set down his spoon. He raised his hand slightly to call the waitress, perhaps to order something else. I stood up. I walked to his table. I removed my holographic dampener as I approached, so that he could see my real form, my chitin and my compound eyes, and the official badge of the Galactic Concordance Bureau on my front plate. He saw me. I watched his eyes. His expression did not change. He did not flinch. He did not run. He simply set his spoon all the way down and placed both hands flat on the table, palms up, in the universal sign of surrender. His left hand, I noticed, moved a fraction of a second before his right. "Echo 7, I said quietly in his own language. "You are under arrest by the authority of the Galactic Concordance. You will come with me peacefully and you will not be harmed." He looked at me for a long moment. Then slowly, he turned his head and looked across the room at our booth, at Maggie. She raised her teacup to him slightly, like a salute, and smiled. His shoulders sank just a little. His expression changed for the first time. Not anger, not fear, something else. Something that I would, much later, come to understand as a kind of weary, professional respect. The look of a man who has been beaten fairly by a kind of opponent he had not known existed. He turned back to me. "Was it the chopsticks?" he asked. His voice was soft and dry. I did not answer. I did not know how to answer. I gestured to my agents and they moved in to take him. He did not resist. He stood up from his table, allowed himself to be restrained, and walked out of the restaurant with quiet dignity between 4 of my best officers. I walked back to our booth. Maggie was finishing her tea. "Sit down, dear," she said. "The dessert is coming. You should not miss it." I sat down. I did not miss it. The creme brulee was as she had promised. Exquisite. I did not return to my office aboard the Viridian's Edge for several cycles. Echo 7 was transported, under the heaviest security I had ever arranged, to a bureau facility in a heavily defended sector. He cooperated entirely. He answered every question. He confirmed every name on every list he had been carrying in his head for 3 years. The information he provided, over the next several months, would lead to the arrest of more than 400 high-ranking officials and corporate leaders across the galaxy. It would bring down 2 more planetary governments. It would, in the words of one historian who later wrote about the case, change the political landscape of the Concordance more than any single event in 200 years. But that was all to come. In the immediate aftermath of the arrest, there was only the report I had to write for Director Quell. And the report was difficult because there was no way to write it that did not sound, to anyone who read it, completely insane. I tried several drafts. The first one was strictly factual. It listed the cycles, the locations, the methods, the moment of identification. It read like a confession of mental illness. The second one was more careful, attempting to explain the technique by which Maggie had identified our target. It read like a parody of an intelligence report. In the end, I gave up on trying to make the report sound respectable. I wrote what had happened. I explained the technique as best as I understood it. I credited Margaret Chen, retired food critic, age 63 Terran years, for the identification. I attached her invoice, which she had submitted with great formality, and which she had charged at exactly the rate she had agreed to with the broker. I sent the report to Director Quell. I waited 3 cycles for her response. When the response came, it was not in writing. She summoned me to her office in person. I traveled to her office. I stood in front of her desk. She read my report aloud, the entire thing, as though she could not quite believe what was on the page in front of her. When she got to the section describing the actual moment of identification, the moment Maggie had named Echo 7 by watching him eat his soup, Director Quell stopped reading. She set the report down. She looked at me for a long time without speaking. Finally she said, in a voice that had gone very quiet, "Vorthak, tell me, how many other humans are like her?" I had been expecting this question. I had thought about my answer for the entire return journey. "Director," I said slowly, "I do not believe there are any other humans exactly like her. Margaret Chen is, by any standard, an exceptional individual. She has spent 40 years building a particular kind of expertise, and that expertise is rare even among her own species." "I see. However," I continued, "I do believe that every human in their own way possesses a similar kind of expertise. Not about food, perhaps, about something else. About the way a ship sounds when its engines are about to fail. About the way a friend's face looks just before they tell a lie. About the way a child cries when they are hurt versus when they are tired. They spend their short lives accumulating these patterns, Director, and they almost never write them down, and they barely even know that they have them. And yet this is how they have always survived. Not with better technology, not with better databases, with something else, with attention, decades of it, a whole lifetime of looking carefully at the world and remembering what they see." Director Quell sat very still. "You are saying," she said slowly, "that we have been hunting humans the wrong way." "I am saying we have been hunting humans the only way we know how to hunt, with our own methods, our own tools, our own way of seeing. And I am saying that humans, when they hide, do not hide from those tools. They hide in the spaces those tools cannot reach, the spaces of pattern and habit and culture and memory. The only thing that finds them is another human with eyes that have been looking carefully for a long time." She nodded slowly. "Recommendations?" she asked. I had thought about this too. "I recommend," I said carefully, "that the Bureau begin to recruit consultants from the human population, not soldiers, not technicians, specialists, people who have spent their lives paying attention to particular kinds of human behavior, critics, teachers, counselors, old people mostly, people who have lived long enough to have learned things that cannot be taught in any school. We hire them not for our cases against other species. We hire them for our cases against humans. Because our tools for those cases do not work." Director Quell was quiet for a long moment. I could not read her expression. "This will horrify the procurement office," she said finally. "Yes, Director, I expect it will. It will horrify the engineering division more." "Yes, Director. You are recommending that we admit, in writing, that an older woman with a pot of tea and a paper book did in 15 cycles what 847 Bureau agents could not do in 3 years." "I am, Director." She looked at me for a long time. Her compound eyes were unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "Approve the recommendation, set up the program, find more humans like her if there are any to find, and Vorthak." "Yes, Director." "You are not going to Frostmoon 6. "Thank you, Director." "You are going to lead the new program." I bowed my head slightly. "It would be my honor, Director." I left her office and returned to my own. I sat at my desk. I looked at the wall of screens where, for 3 years, the face of Echo 7 had stared back at me. The screens were dark now. The hunt was over. Tomorrow I would begin a different kind of work, building a different kind of unit, learning a different kind of skill. But tonight I had one last thing to do. I traveled back to Threshold Station. The journey took a cycle and a half. I went straight to the Tea Garden Cafe on the promenade level, partially hidden behind hanging plants. I expected, for some reason, that Maggie would not be there. I had not warned her that I was coming. She had her own life. She had retired again from this brief return to the world of hunters. But she was there, at the same table, with the same paper book, with the same pot of tea. She looked up as I entered. She smiled. "Sit down, Vorthak. I was beginning to wonder when you would come." I sat down. She poured me a cup. We sat for a long while in silence, drinking together. Finally I said, "I have a question, Maggie. I have been thinking about it for many cycles. Since the night at the stone lantern. I cannot stop thinking about it." "Of course you can't, dear. Ask." "How did you really do it?" She raised her eyebrows slightly. "I told you how. You told me what you saw, the chopsticks, the garnish, the flinch, the hands. Yes. You told me what you saw, but that is not the question. The question is, how did you see it? How did you know to look there? How did you, after 60 seconds of watching, know that he was the one?" She set her cup down. She looked at me. Her blue-gray eyes were the color of a cloudy sky, and they were, as always, entirely calm. "Vorthak," she said, "I have spent my entire life watching people eat. I have eaten with hundreds of thousands of them in restaurants on more than 200 worlds over 40 years. I have watched their hands, their mouths, their shoulders, their eyes, their breath. I have written about them. I have remembered them. After a while, you begin to see more than the food. You begin to see how the food gets to them. And then, after a longer while, you stop seeing the food entirely." She paused. "You start seeing the person." I sat with that for a long time. Around us, the cafe continued its quiet business. Cups clinked. Pages turned. A young human couple at the next table laughed softly at some private joke. A server moved between tables with a fresh pot of tea. The galaxy turned outside the station, full of fugitives and ghosts and 100 billion stars, and at the small table near the back of the tea garden cafe, an older human woman finished her cup and prepared, eventually, to pay her bill and go home. The deadliest hunter the Concordance had ever hired. I asked her before I left if she would consider working with my new program, as an advisor, as a teacher, as someone who could help us train other humans to do what she did. She thought about it for a moment. "I am retired, Vorthak," she said. "But I have been retired before and it has never lasted. I will think about it. Send me your proposal. We will talk again." I bowed my head slightly. I paid for the tea, despite her protests. I walked out of the cafe and back through the busy promenade. The station was loud as it had been the first time. 1,000 species moved around me, speaking 100 languages, and the air was thick with the mixed pheromones of every kind of creature in the known galaxy. But I walked through it differently now. I looked at the humans I passed. I watched their hands, the way they carried their bags, the way they ate the small snacks they bought from the carts on the promenade, the way some of them walked with their backs to walls, the way some of them sat with one chair empty beside them. I had been hunting humans for most of my career, and only now, after 3 years of failure and 15 cycles with an older woman who reviewed restaurants for a living, did I begin to understand what I had been hunting. They are not what we thought they were. They are not the species the reports described. They are something quieter than that and stranger and far more dangerous. Each one of them is a library of small noticings, accumulated over a single short life and never written down. Each one of them sees patterns the rest of us cannot see. Each one of them, in their own small way, is a hunter. The galaxy will eventually figure this out. Other species will eventually learn what I learned at the Stone Lantern restaurant on Brennan's Hollow, but it may take a long time, and when it happens, things will change. For now, I have my new program. I have a list of humans I want to recruit, to interview, to learn from. I have a great deal of work to do. And every cycle, when I can manage it, I take an hour off in the middle of my day, and I go to the cafeteria, and I find a quiet table, and I order a meal, and I eat it slowly. Not because I am hungry, although I usually am. Because I am learning to watch. Because I am learning to see the person. Because somewhere in the galaxy right now, a fugitive is sitting down to a meal in a small restaurant on a forgotten moon. He thinks he is safe. He thinks no one can find him. He is wrong, and he does not yet know it. And somewhere in the same galaxy, a quiet woman with a pot of tea and a paper book is preparing, perhaps, to find him. And I want to be the kind of hunter, when my time comes, who can do what she does. Not with my scanners, Not with my databases, not with my machines. With my eyes. With my patience. With my attention. The way the humans do it.